Open this meeting of the Joint Committee on Public Accounts and Audit, a private briefing for the inquiry into the administration of age pension. Could a committee member please resolve... no, we've already done that. So I'm resuming the meeting and declare open the public hearing of the Joint Committee of Public Accounts and Audit. Sorry, forgive me, for the inquiry into the administration of the age pension. I thank the witnesses for being here today. I call representatives from the Department of Social Services, Services Australia, the Department of Veterans Affairs and the ANAO. For the Hansard record, could you each please state your name and the capacity in which you appear before the committee. We're going to go around the room and then we'll go online as well. We're going to go from the deputy chair's right, so those in the corner of the room all the way through the ANAO.
Doesn't matter where you start, Matt. You go.
Matt McMahon, Services Australia.
Peter Martin, Acting General Manager, Care and Support Division, Services Australia.
Robin Shannon, Deputy CEO, Program Design Group, Services Australia.
Matt Flavel, Deputy Secretary, Department of Social Services.
Cheryl Ann Navarro, Acting Group Manager, System Strategy and Seniors, Department of Social Services.
Kirsty Johnson, Payment Structures and Seniors Branch at DSS.
Shadu, International Payments and Compliance, Acting Branch Manager, DSS.
And we've got some people on ANAO.
Daniel White, Acting Executive Director, Performance Audit Services Group, ANAO.
Caroline McLeish, Auditor General. Peter Lane, Group Executive Director, Performance Audit Services Group.
Carla Jago, Deputy Auditor General.
And then we'll go online. Sean, Mr. Thomas.
Hello, Sean Thomas, Acting General Manager, Payment Assurance Program and Appeals Division, Services Australia.
Ms. Clark.
And Rachel Clark, Acting Deputy CEO, Payments and Integrity Group for Services Australia.
My name is Josh Burns. I'm the Chair of the committee. We've got Scott Buchholz, the Deputy Chair. Online is Carol Berry, MP, Mary Aldred MP, and one other. I'm not sure who that is online. Is that a witness or a MP? +61410.
I think that's a witness.
DVA?
Yeah, it's not DVA.
Yeah, DVA are just having some trouble with the login.
Great. All right. Well, why don't we'll come back to them. Does anyone have an opening statement before we kick off?
No, not from DSS or Service Australia, Chair.
Okay. This hearing is a formal proceeding of the Parliament. The giving of false or misleading evidence is a serious matter and may be regarded as a contempt of the Parliament. The evidence given today will be recorded by Hansard and tracks parliamentary privilege. I remind all present today that as Chair, I will ensure the proceedings are conducted in an orderly, respectful and courteous way, despite the shoddy start. I further remind committee members that public officials should not be asked to give opinions on matters of policy and should be given reasonable opportunity to refer questions to superior officers or to a minister. However, this does not preclude questions asked for explanations of policies or factual questions about when and how policies were adopted. Witnesses are also reminded that any claim that would be contrary to the public interest to answer a question must be made by a minister and accompanied by a statement setting out the basis for the claim. Rightio. No update from DVA. ANAO, do you have any opening statement?
Sorry, I do have a short opening statement, Chair, which I circulated either for tabling. I'm happy to read that out if that's helpful.
Yeah, why don't you do that?
Okay, thank you. So, good morning, Chair, Deputy Chair and committee members. Thanks for the opportunity to appear before the committee today as part of the inquiry into the administration of the age pension. The age pension is a significant component of Australian government expenditure and a core mechanism for supporting eligible seniors. In 2024-25, program outlay comprised 8.4% of the federal budget and 42.5% of social security payments. The ANAO conducted the audit to provide assurance to the Parliament on the Department of Social Services, or DSS's, and Services Australia's administration of the program. The audit objective was to assess the effectiveness of DSS's and Services Australia's administration of the age pension. The audit examined DSS's oversight, Services Australia's processes for assessing applicants' and recipients' eligibility, and Services Australia's communication and engagement with applicants and recipients. The audit concluded that the administration of the age pension was partly effective. This reflected weaknesses in DSS's oversight and Services Australia's assessment, assurance and engagement processes, which affected payment accuracy, timeliness and accessibility for eligible seniors. Effectiveness could be improved by strengthening processes to verify recipients' eligibility and pension rates, by simplifying and expediting access for applicants and recipients, and by reporting on program effectiveness. One of the key messages from the audit is that where policy and service delivery are managed by different entities, the policy owner retains primary accountability for lawful program delivery and for the achievement of intended outcomes. From an accountability perspective, DSS remains accountable and responsible for lawful program delivery and intended outcomes, even where Services Australia delivers a service. Clear governance, active risk management and effective performance monitoring are needed to ensure payment integrity controls operate as intended, performance and compliance issues are addressed, and service delivery risks are identified and managed. Additionally, DSS can work with Services Australia to assess whether policy or legislative complexity is affecting service delivery, address compliance and performance issues, and report on program effectiveness. Services Australia, as a service delivery entity, can directly address the risks that contribute most to payment inaccuracy, including through better verification of age pension eligibility, and to use the data and insights that it already collects to improve service delivery for applicants and recipients. The audit report made 9 recommendations focused on strengthening DSS oversight, refreshing DSS and DVA administration arrangements, improving evaluation of program impact, enhancing verification and automation controls, better aligning compliance activities with payment risks, improving debt letters, and addressing senior service access needs. We look forward to supporting the committee in its inquiry. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to start with Services Australia. So Services Australia, whoever's best to answer this question, can you talk me through what the main complaint is that Services Australia receives around the access and how people access? And yeah, let's start there.
Chair, look, we don't have a detailed breakdown of complaint data, but I think really, I was just conferring with my colleague there, the findings in the audit report I think are consistent with the sort of general themes of customer feedback in relation to age pension. I mean, I think by nature we all acknowledge that age pension is a complex payment. Increasingly over time, more Australians are obviously entering into retirement years with a range of different forms of resources. So navigating the assessment of income and assets is probably a key area of complexity. The complexity of the claim form, I think, is an area that obviously the audit made some comment on. The agency ourselves have been looking at our claim forms. We take every opportunity to try and look at, for such a large program such as age pension, we're really looking at the program from end to end to look at where the pain points are for customers and where the opportunities to improve are. So, I mean, in the broad, I think the complexity, the claim process, the timeliness, there are a range of issues related to how quickly people's claims are processed and how quickly they can get advice from the agency. And on all of those things, obviously, we've taken some concerted action through the period of the audit, but since to actually look at how we can and have actually delivered some improvements in some of those key areas, including improving timeliness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for that. And so that's okay. Well, let's try and we'll try. Forgive me for interrupting, but we'll try and just try and get into the specifics of this, if that's okay.
Sure.
Yes, you correctly mentioned what is mentioned in the audit committee. But how many complaints does Services Australia get per annum?
I think we did have some in there. I don't have the total figure of complaints. We can certainly provide on notice information about age pension related complaints, but I know there's been a reduction in complaints, but I don't know what the baseline figure.
Do you want to give me a ballpark figure?
Just bear with me.
Maybe we could, Chair, we could ask A&O. I think they.
I was just about to. ANAO, do you have the numbers at hand?
Yes, the audit report did include a table of recorded age pension complaints through the years 21-22 to 23-24. So in 23-24, the total number was 25,362. That was an increase from 14,108 in 21-22.
Right. So say that again, from 21-22 was 14,000, and then in 23-24 it was 25,000.
Yep, that's right, just over 25,000. Yep.
Yeah. I'll ask Services Australia again. Well, on the nature of those sorts of complaints, do you have a breakdown? Do you keep a breakdown of them?
Yeah, I think that information can be obtained, by broad theme. We just have to take it on notice. I'm sorry.
ANAO, do you have a breakdown of what those themes are?
So we did include two tables in the audit report. The first one was the main reason for age pension complaints, and the one, or the two at the top of that in terms of the primary complaints was the process, the claim, application or assessment process, or the decision on the process, and then the secondary complaint, largest complaint was the wait time.
Right. So the biggest complaint of the numbers of the numbers almost doubled is the process and also the wait time.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
Is that correct, Services Australia?
I don't dispute that.
I mean, it's not. Clearly, it's not a state secret. Like, why not just have those numbers at hand?
I prepared for the hearing, I'm sorry, and I collected a range of information. I just didn't bring the complaint data by theme. I'm sorry.
Even though it was in the ANAO report?
There were many things covered in the report. I mean, what I do have is a figure that suggests that there's been a 52% reduction in Centrelink complaints in the 24-25 financial year, reflecting the service delivery improvements the agency has made. So there's been quite a bit of concerted effort, including as a result of government investment in increased workforce capacity in the agency. In the 24-25 budget, there was an investment of $1.7 billion to increase agency staff, around 3,000 staff, to really start to address across all major programs some of the backlogs and concerns about timeliness. In the 26-27 budget, the government has effectively repeated that investment, and a $1.6 billion investment over 2 years, again to maintain those additional staff and the capability to be able to work through in a more timely manner the sorts of claims that we're talking about, as well as across child support, all of our payments.
We're not here to talk about child support though.
No, but I'm just saying there's been an investment which has actually assisted to reduce some of those long delays. So it's not surprising that the most recent aggregate complaint data that I have to hand today shows that there has been a reduction in complaints. But clearly there had been, issues raised and identified around the timeliness of claim processing, and there's been quite a bit of concerted attention to try and address that, including to bring down some of those average wait times, which we can talk to as well.
Before we go into the timing of it, so absolutely, very much appreciate all the hard work of the team, and there has been a huge amount of investment into reducing those wait times across the board. However, today we're talking about the age pension, and while I understand the whole service delivery model is important, if we can focus on the age pension, because that's what we're trying to inquire into today, and with all respect, the total numbers coming down is not reflected specifically in the age pension unless you have numbers of late since the 23-24 number of 25,000 complaints.
Again, I would need to take it on notice, but if the general trend holds true specifically for age pension, I would expect to see a reduction, but I'd have to confirm that in writing.
And you don't have any further details of the more recent years?
No, Chair, sorry.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, if you could provide that on notice to the committee, that would be very much appreciated. So the process then is the biggest nature of, the biggest topic of complaint, as outlined by the ANAO. Can you go through what that what that actually means for the agency, what the complaints are around the processes first?
So it goes to feedback around the information requested in the claim process, and that can be done through the manual claim form, or it can be done online, or we offer an assisted claim process also for customers. So there is quite extensive income and assets information that's requested through the claim process to be applied in our assessment for eligibility. So it essentially goes to some of the a range of things. For example, the layout and presentation of the information on the form, some of the information requested, and then also the way that we go about collecting evidence to verify some of that information.
And I think it's probably fair to say some people might have more straightforward affairs, other people have more complex affairs. So once you have people who might have been born overseas, there are questions regarding residency and working life in Australia. They might be required to seek a payment under an international agreement. Their partners' affairs might be complex. If they're partnered, they have to obviously provide information about their partner's means. So, you know, some of these issues, the complexity of some of the issues will go to a person's personal circumstances. But indeed, as we've acknowledged, you know, the process, one of the things that we are looking at and that the agency recently did was a sort of design review to actually look at what the experience is if you were to sort of step through the process with different types of circumstance and complexity to really try and unpack further what some of those pain points are for individuals.
I'm going to pause there on the design. DVA are apparently in the meeting, but they can't see us. I think they're on their phone. So if the representative from DVA, are you able to unmute yourself and just introduce yourself and state your full name for the Hansard record so that we can ask you questions? I've got two numbers, 0410, ending in 95. That person remains a mystery. What about 0437, ending in 71? Can you unmute yourself and state your full name? Kind of feel like a customer on hold. Well, we try.
Circle back, Chair.
I reckon. Right, let's come back to the design form. What does that actually mean?
The actual service design process that we did was basically a user-centred design sort of research piece where the agency has a capability of staff who conduct projects like this, and they basically map out you know, a sort of from an end-to-end process what that looks like. So they did a particular deep dive into the issue of income and assets because that's one of the more complex elements of I guess assessing age pension eligibility. And so they undertake, you know, desktop research, but also talk to customers, gather a range of evidence from different touch points across the agency, including, I understand, working with our staff who are involved in the processing because obviously they have a lot of insights as they interact with customers. And sort of pull together some of those themes and think about some, if you like, some personas of what it looks like for a person with some different types of circumstance and identify some opportunities for improvement. I mean, I think one of the...
Can I just pause? Can I just ask a question on that? How many people are in this capability staff unit?
I'd have to take that on notice. I mean, it's something that a lot of service delivery agencies do as a matter of course. I think a lot of policy agencies, if they don't have an in-house capability from time to time, will actually procure that. I'm looking at my colleague.
Give me a rough.
I really don't know, Chair.
5 people, 50 people?
I don't think it's 50 people. No, it's a smaller team than that. And look, it often will be a multidisciplinary team. So some of the people in my area might go in as subject matter experts. So we pull together a team. As I said, it's a capability. So it's people who have got the experience of running these kinds of effectively research kind of projects using that kind of methodology.
What have they said? I mean, if they're engaging across the organisation and engaging with staff, what have they said? What have they said that needs to be changed?
Well, they identified a number of opportunities, including, and I think it's reasonably topical, trying to identify opportunities where we might be able to use information that people already have or that their financial institution might collect that could be what's the right word, sort of auto-populated in their claim. I mean, I think many of us are very used to the process of lodging our tax return where a lot of information is basically pre-filled or auto-populated in our tax return. There's quite limited current ability to do that in the age pension claim process, so that's an opportunity. It's not a simple process. There's obviously a lot of issues to work through in terms of how you would do that, how people might consent to that. You know, can they opt in? What legislative change might be required? What's the sort of quality standard required for the data? So there's a lot to work through, but I think that's one area where there's some opportunity, certainly working with our colleagues in DSS and ATO and other agencies to think about, you know, is that a real game changer for individuals where at the moment they're really having to supply that information themselves and then we're having to verify it. Some of those things are the sorts of, they add to the complexity of the process, but also, I guess, the risk in terms of the correctness of outlays as well, because people's circumstances change, obviously. So, you know...
I'm just trying to find out, like, what's the... So... You mentioned that the main complaint is around the design of the form. What is the actual complaint? What is the issue here? What on the form? What's the design form problem?
Okay.
Look, I understand it's around some of the presentation of the form, the set out, so, you know, some of the, you know, visual presentation of the form, do you mind unpacking that a bit? So thank you very much for that answer. Do you mind unpacking it? Like what about the visual presentation? So the form is, in its current state, is a 28-page document. It has a range of introduction in terms of providing guidance and instructions on how to complete the form. But it has a natural way of sequencing through. If you answer one question, you may proceed to one pathway or proceed to another. So it is seeking to collect a lot of information, so it is consistent with the design and layout of most of Services Australia claim forms, but certainly receive feedback in terms of generally its presentation layout, lots of questions, the sequencing of questions, those sorts of are some of the features of the feedback.
Anything on the language?
Made available in multiple languages?
Yeah, it's certainly made available in multiple languages.
Not the multilingual aspect, but the actual specific language, the complexity of the language.
Look, that could well be the case, Chair. I think one of the tensions that we need to balance is ensuring that we're clear about the legal basis on which we request information. So sometimes our forms and letters can look and be experienced as being quite technical, and so trying to get the balance between correctly referencing the law and the basis on which we're asking or telling somebody something, and actually making it easy for the recipient or person completing the form to understand that can be a tension, but that's obviously something that we're looking at how to get that balance right.
I'm going to throw to the ANAO here, if that's okay. And we're getting into the weeds here, but I think this is the user experience of Australians, so it's important to be here. In the ANAO's sort of assessment, was there language on the form that stood out as being unnecessarily complex or that could be simplified?
We did point in the audit to a review that had been done by Services Australia on pain points that were indicated by applicants. And those included the fact that participants were required to answer a lot of questions with no clear guidance about information that was needed. Some of the claims questions were ambiguous, difficult to understand. The claims question had been developed under the assumption that applicants have a high degree of financial literacy, and the forms were difficult to navigate. We also highlighted that Services Australia identified some opportunities for improvement from the review, so to use easier to understand language and visual support on the websites and online claim portals, to review questions to ensure that only the information necessary to determine applicants' age pension eligibility is collected, to provide a checklist of information and supporting evidence that may assist the claim, and to redesign the paper application forms to improve readability and navigation. So there were a number of opportunities for improvement that were identified, but at least as at February 25, which is what we published in the audit, Services Australia hadn't made changes to the paper and the online application processes in response to that exercise. I guess that sort of highlights a more general message that we have. And we see in audits across the sector on the importance of using some of the data and the reviews that agencies undertake to improve service delivery. Typically, agencies will gather a lot of data, a lot of information from their customers, and it's important that feedback is used to plan improvements.
When was that Services Australia's audit done?
So the review that I was speaking of was quite...
Yeah, sorry, the review, sorry.
So that review was done in 2018, and since the publication of the audit report, we have made some of those changes. I would need to come back to you, I think, on notice with the dates that we made those changes, but we have actually taken up some of those opportunities to improve the form. But we can, as you know, the later piece that I referred to is the next sort of stage of continuous improvement.
Sorry, let's just go back there. So we had the review in 2018.
Yep.
They highlighted questions without real guidance, ambiguous nature, requiring a high degree of literacy, no checklists of what people require, quite sort of really specific areas where the forms could be improved. And Auditor General, you just mentioned that in Feb 25, when you published this report, those changes hadn't yet been implemented. Do you mind just going through that again?
At that time, so as part of the audit, we asked the question whether the opportunities for improvement that Services Australia identified from that review had been taken up. But at that time, February 25, we were advised by Services Australia that they are not, although we understand that since that time, some of the changes have been made. We have not audited that, though.
Yeah. So why weren't any changes made in the 7 years after you had the review?
I'm not in a position to answer that. I mean, I don't have visibility of the reasons why those changes weren't put into place. I would make an assumption that some of them may have been resource related, but I don't know the answer to that question.
We'd have to confirm on notice, but certainly I expect that in that time we've certainly made improvements to the information available online, and also so some of the supporting information would have been certainly reviewed and updated, and also the online claim process would have been an area of focus for the agency in terms of implementing and improving it as well.
So did Services Australia accept all of the recommendations of the review done in 2018? Do you agree with them?
That was an internal piece of work. It was an internal piece of work to inform ongoing program improvement. So
Right. You didn't hire anyone to do the review.
We did. It looks like we did actually hire an external company that did usability testing. So that's the sort of internal capability that I was talking about earlier. So it looks like we actually outsourced that at that time. Chair, I think it
So it was an external.
That's my understanding from the description of the work. I think it would be helpful if.
Why did you say it was internal?
No, sorry. Perhaps I've confused matters, and there's a bit of a conflation. So, the 2018 piece of work looks to have been outsourced. The more recent piece of work that we've done has been done using our in-house capability. So apologies
how much did the 2018 review cost?
We'd have to take that on notice.
You could provide that to the committee. That would be very useful.
And with that, I will just provide on notice how we actually, the timeline for how we took on board some of those, noting the Auditor General's point about the status at the time of the conclusion of the audit.
Yeah. It doesn't sound like much was done up until then.
I can't conclusively answer that, so that's why I'd like to take it on notice. As Ms Martin said, I think there may have been some supporting information to clarify matters, but it doesn't appear that the form itself was significantly changed as a result of the 2018 findings.
Was it changed at all?
I can't answer that question, Chair. Well, I'll have to come back on notice.
And there is the call form, and then other accompanying forms that relate to it. So we can look at also the accompanying forms and whether there's been updates made to those as well.
I can see I've got colleagues on the line, and Ailey, you look like you're raring to go. So I might pause my questions there. And I've got some more, so I'll come back, but I want to give my colleagues a go. So, Ailey, and then Carol and Mary, if you want to have a go as well, just let me know. All right, Ailey, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you all for coming in today to give evidence to our committee. We really appreciate it. I'm just, one of the things that I consistently see I consistently have older people coming into my electorate office really struggling to navigate the systems and processes in terms of navigating the aged care, so anything to do with forms or services, anything to do with Services Australia forms or things that they need to fill in. And with an ageing population and more older people struggling with this type of gap in technology knowledge, I'm just wondering if you can talk through some of the things you've done in terms of trying to address that, because I know that there's been probably a lot of reviews over the past few years talking about the applicants' and recipients' experience. There's an increasing need for older people to rely on third parties, whether it's their relatives or somebody else. And I think generally very, very difficult to navigate Services Australia and some of the forms and different things that they have to fill in. So I just want to know if there's been things in the last couple of years that you guys have done to address this.
Sure. So we offer a range of application channels and methods. So that will maybe online through the claim form, and we also do offer an assisted customer claim process as well. So there's multiple ways that the claim can be submitted.
Can I just step out what the assisted customer claim is? Like, what does it involve? Might be helpful.
Sure. So assisted customer claim essentially involves a customer sitting with one of our service officers, and that can be face-to-face or online, and that is a process where the service officer will step the customer through the claim form and assist them in terms of understanding the questions in the claim process and then responding to those questions. It also then provides that customer an opportunity to also go away and collect the supporting evidence that they need to come back and support that claim. So that's how the assisted customer claim process works. We have a financial information system services offering as well, and that is an offering where customers can book appointments, and those appointments can be made done either telephone or face-to-face. We have a range of delivery options for those, and you don't need to be an existing customer to get that and access that service. They can assist customers as they are moving into looking at sort of this pathway of moving to retirement, understanding how they may go through the claim process. So that is one service. Can be done face-to-face, and the alternative is that also that we've got a range of webinars online from that service that do explanatory in pieces on how income and assets work and how we do sort of income and assets assessments in that process. So they are sort of the key main support offerings we have for the age pension.
Do you have data on how many people have accessed that particular service, particularly the one-on-one? I think that the online, access to online education, that's kind of the barrier sometimes. So it would be interesting to see how many officers that you have to have these one-on-one conversations, and how many people have actually accessed the service, or even know, just to give an indication of whether people know about it, or, are you able to take that on notice?
Certainly able to take that on notice, and I just recall, I should mention also that we do digital coaching, and that might be something that you're interested in us in getting some details on, and that again is something where customers can book time with one of our service officers, and that can be done by telephone or face-to-face again, in terms of just assisting a customer, sitting down with a customer, helping them navigate through. We ask them to bring whatever is their main device, or a number of devices with them to those digital coaching sessions, and it's a one-on-one step through in terms of demonstrating how to access the services on those different devices.
I think it would be good to know how many in different regions of the one-on-one coaching is available. I think having that service available is amazing. I guess it depends on how many people need it and how many people there are, but I've just got one more question, Chair. I know that in previous reports there's been some criticism of the agency over the processes and training for staff to kind of independently or manually being able to check or override calculations of the age pension or how much a person has got paid. Just wondering what you're doing in that area of training staff in terms of calculating their age pension, and whether there is the ability or a process for being able to, independently check that the calculation is correct.
So we have a sort of phased stage level of training for our service officers, and particularly in age pension, and we use what's called skill tags to identify once a service officer has been professionally trained to a particular level, and that then enables us to assign the right level of work to the right skilled staff. In the age pension training offering, we also have what's called our complex assessment officers, and they are then the most highly skilled and trained officers, and they're the ones that we really focus on training and looking at the income and assets in the claim assessment processes. That's the way that we train our staff, and certainly there is quite strong demand on our complex assessment officers in this particular claim type. And I think that what the audit report is reflecting, that that the system itself does the main calculation of the eligibility. It relies on our staff putting the inputs in terms of what is the income and assets, but then it is essentially the system that determines then the payability and eligibility rate for payment. We certainly are looking much more in terms of some of our post-payment processes, in terms of then looking at whether the system is correctly calculating and determining payment rates as a strategy, as an alternative to increasing the number of service delivery staff that have that really highly skilled level of understanding of how that eligibility and calculation works.
So do you regularly do audits of just random audits of, the system determined rates and whether they've, they are correct? Do you regularly randomly audit whether it's working?
So one of the observations in the audit report that the agency has taken on board is, as Ms Martin said, to conduct
post-payment transaction testing.
Post-payment transaction testing, I'll get it right, which is effectively a sample of determined claims to actually do that check, so that we can identify specific instances where it may not be correct, but whether there are actually any sort of broader issues that we need to actually look at. So it's effectively an exercise of the nature that you just described. I think while I understand your question relating to sort of individual staff checking the calculation, I think that, as Ms Martin said, there are some very complex matters to be assessed in the age pension space, and we do have a core of staff who are highly trained in this area, but I think you do start to introduce the risk of human error if you move away from the approach that's taken. But I think the post-payment I can't get it right. Transaction testing is a good way to sort of double check and make sure, as I said, that there's nothing untoward in an individual case or in a more systemic way.
So if somebody came to one of your offices, walked into Centrelink and said, "Hey, I think I've spoken to my friend, I think I've been underpaid, I don't know why they're getting more than me, they've got a lot more money than me," what is the actual process for checking that?
That would be, particularly in the circumstances you've explained, we would then go through an authorised review process. So we'd collect the details of what the customer's concerns are, and then go through a process of doing a secondary review of the payment and what we have on record on file to reconfirm its accuracy.
Okay, and would that be a system review, or is that individual people having a look at it and checking it?
Those reviews are conducted by our authorised review officers, so that's by trained staff.
And would that then trigger, going forward as the ANAO, would that then trigger a wider, if you found there to be an inaccuracy, would that automatically trigger a wider, more random checking of the payments, of random payments?
I think only if something in that review would suggest that there's something that is systemically, causing an inaccuracy. My my observation would be that generally the reviews find that there's some information on the customer record that we need to update that would deliver an alternative outcome, or in fact the outcome may be that it's upheld.
Did the ANAO want to comment on that part of their review?
We did make some observations around a couple of aspects of the testing that the agencies talked about. We did note, as part of the payment integrity assurance program work, that there wasn't a post-payment transaction testing conducted in 23-24, so we didn't go into detail in relation to that. We do talk about the payment accuracy review program, where recipients' payments are reviewed as part of a program of work to identify any errors. The audit report found that in both 21-22 and 22-23, roughly 90% of those reviews identified an error. Those errors could occur at the recipient end and could occur at the entity end.
I might just also add, the age pension has been in the system, it's called the ISA system, for about over 40 years. And the system incorporates business rules that translates the legislated requirements into the system. And Services Australia had an internal audit done of that in 2024, and it found that Services Australia needed to do some risk assessments around those aged business rules that hadn't been looked at for some time, and that they needed to finalise a risk assessment of all of that. That was due to be completed by the 31st of December 2024. At the time we conducted this audit, they had not yet completed that assessment. So that was also something that was meant to occur, to go back and check those original business rules.
And again,
so has that since been done now?
So that work is in train. So a number of elements of that work have either been completed or commenced. So we have agreed and taken on board the ANAO audit recommendation in relation to that.
So how long has it been? Is it just the 23, 24 and 25 that haven't had those random checks? How long has it been since we've had random checks of the system-determined payments?
So the conducting of the post-payment transaction testing, we've got some internal guidance around when that should occur. And I just get my references notes here. Look, I'm sorry, I'm struggling to find my reference, but I'll continue to try. We did conduct post-payment transaction testing in the 24-25 period. The internal guidance advises that where it is that you achieve a particular outcome in terms of the PAR result, which my colleague could speak to, then it may be something that it's up to program areas to determine if you want to go ahead with the post-payment transaction testing in that period. So in 25-26, based on the guidelines, we achieved a rating in the PAR that meant that the program team determined they wouldn't conduct the testing at that time, but have worked instead on focusing on the areas of the audit report in terms of improving the process that they're starting to conduct now.
Right. So it's not compulsory to do it like yearly. It's a determination of the program lead or at the time.
And there's some guidance in place, there's some agency guidance in place about that guide you in terms of your decision making and where it would be appropriate and how you would go about doing that process.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Chair. That's...
No problem. Carol, did you want to go next?
Thank you. That would be good. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yep.
Oh, good. Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much for coming along today and for your time. We appreciate it. This Audit Office inquiry has found that the DSS's oversight of the aged pension is only partly effective. The inquiry found that the DSS has not promptly addressed issues to ensure performance standards are met, that IT systems operate as intended, or that the DVA is set up to administer the program consistently with legislation. I wondered if the DSS could respond to that.
Yes, thanks very much. We, as you would have seen from the report, we agree with those recommendations. We think there are important opportunities to strengthen our oversight. As the Auditor General mentioned in her opening remarks, the nature of this arrangement, if you want to call it, is that ultimately accountability for payments sits with the DSS Secretary. That is under the Social Security Act. The responsibility for service delivery is then delegated to the CEO of Services Australia. And so in order to get the accountabilities right, there's an assurance program that kind of runs over the top of this program and all social security payments that gives us visibility over how that service delivery is being discharged. That includes a couple of key metrics, so importantly the accuracy of payments, which we've been talking about, the timeliness of payments, and then other matters that kind of go to the governance of those payments. We get an annual assurance statement from Services Australia, and a number of these recommendations will be adopted by strengthening the reporting that Services Australia gives to us as the program manager each year, as well as probably some more ongoing governance strengthening about what might be happening within this program and other programs through the course of the year that will give us insights into whether there needs to be adjustments to policy settings or other things we need to collaboratively work on to improve overall performance.
Thank you. And so this audit, of course, found that while you mentioned, my video's going up, while you mentioned that you have an annual, I think you said you have an annual assurance arrangement, is that regular enough? I mean, this audit found that you have arrangements for regular and ongoing exchanges of information, but the audit found that, and this inquiry found that valuable insights might be lost, duplicated or failed to inform strategic decision making, and that there's a lack of documentation or follow-up. Would you mind responding to that?
I just refer to my earlier comments. I think we agree with the recommendations. On the governance between the two entities, I think there's the formal governance arrangements that sit under the bilateral management agreement between the two entities that's supported by a range of formal committee meetings that happen on a regular basis. I think the one thing that perhaps gets a bit missed is that there's then just irregular and ad hoc discussions that happen between both DSS and Services Australia. Ms Shannon and I talk regularly, perhaps a bit too much for her liking at times. You know, as program owner, there's a lot of discussions that happen week to week about what are we seeing on this issue, here's an opportunity to think about changing arrangements. And I think, so we just need to find ways of doing more of that, but probably the failing on our part is to not have documented some of that, where, you know, we might talk by phone, perhaps having some accompanying notes, transcripts of records, things like that might strengthen some of that sort of supporting governance.
Carol, can I just ask on that, and then Carol, please take over again. Can the ANAO just comment on the specifics of DSS's governance shortfalls in the report that are supposed to be covered in the sort of ad hoc or informal engagements that were just described by DSS?
Chair, I can provide a little bit more information on that. I think, as has already been noted, one of the things we certainly observed was some of the discussions that were occurring were not formally documented, which meant that issues were not able to be escalated as appropriate or formally progressed. In terms of the annual assurance documentation, we did note that in 23-24, for example, Services Australia's age pension risk management plan identified a risk of an incorrect payment due to an IT system error. There were no mention of specific controls or treatments indicated. I did already mention that the post-payment transaction testing was not conducted in that year, and the age pension risk management plan was not reviewed quarterly as required. So there were a few shortcomings in that year alone in terms of the annual assurance statement that was provided.
Can we just get clarity on that? So the quarterly assessments that are legislated to be required were not done, and also obviously the undocumented minutes or undocumented interactions. And what was the third one that you just mentioned as well?
There was also just a mention in the 23-24 year that the post-payment transaction testing, which has been discussed just recently, was not undertaken, so that was not able to be provided as an assurance mechanism in the statement in that year.
Right. And has DSS have you done your quarterly reviews? Have you been documenting your interactions, and have you been doing the what was the third one again? The
post-payment transaction testing?
The payment testing. And then I'm handing back to Carol.
Okay, so Chair, the post-payment transaction testing is a matter for Services Australia. On the strengthening of governance, I think, again, we've accepted that recommendation. We have a deadline, an internal deadline set for January 2027 to have adopted or implemented those recommendations. That includes strengthening some of the documentation, ensuring that all the relevant activities identified under the bilateral management agreement are undertaken.
So this report was done last year. Have you done your quarterly assessments?
My understanding, my staff will correct me if I'm wrong, is that we've already moved to adopt most of what's been recommended.
That is a skillful way of not answering the question. Let me say, what has changed over the past couple of years is we have a strengthened overall governance arrangement between the two entities. That includes more regular meetings of senior staff, more regular discussions between the CEO and Secretary. That acts as an opportunity for any of these issues as they come up to be identified and dealt with at quite senior levels. I'm not sure if any of my colleagues... I'm not asking if you guys are talking to each other. I'm asking if you've adopted and you've actually implemented the recommendations as made by the Auditor General. So Carol, I'm going to hand back to you to take over, but yeah.
Thank you. So the AMAO found that Services Australia does not have a process to independently calculate system-determined aged care payments, and that it's difficult for staff to identify if calculations are incorrect. Staff are trained to trust system calculations and receive limited training on conducting manual calculations to verify. I wondered if you could speak to that, because that does seem to be a major problem.
So I think we actually addressed that issue in our earlier response to questions, but just to, I guess, provide a high-level response, we talked about the work that the agency does to train staff, including to apply skill tags that sort of are commensurate with the complexity of the work that staff do, and that we have staff who are trained to do more complex assessments in the age pension space, and that they do have the capacity to check calculations, but it is not something that is done routinely, that it is something where if a customer firstly, if a customer raises a concern, then obviously there's an accepted process to seek a review of a decision, and that decision would be reviewed by an authorised review officer. But then secondly, the second element goes to the post-payment transaction testing. See, I've got it right now, finally. It's taken me about 5 goes to get that out correctly. Apologies. That we actually have a set of guidelines, as Ms Martin mentioned, where if we get, when we assess our program accuracy results, we have a sort of a set of criteria where if a certain threshold of accuracy is reached, then it is a decision for the program manager to determine whether that testing occurs. We did that testing in 2024-25, and you might want to talk a little more to some of that. So that's actually looking at the accuracy of the calculations after they've been made as a sort of more sample-based approach.
Perhaps in the interest of time, I might pick up, because I know there'll be other people who have questions and then have them until midday. This question is for Mr. Gravel. We have in this report by the ANAO had some observations around the complexity of age pension legislation, and some of the complexity for people who are navigating this system. In your view, should we be simplifying the delivery and implementation of the age pension in order to improve the experience of applicants and recipients? And is the complexity of the legislation an issue in your mind?
Thanks. I don't think it's so much the complexity of the legislation as more the complexity of the underlying policy. You know, the age pension in its form has been around for more than nearly 120 years. And through that time, it reflects the sort of wishes of society and parliaments about, you know, who should get access and under what arrangements they should get access. One of the most striking features about the Australian system, both for age pension but social security, is just how tightly targeted the means test is. We probably have the most, if not the most, then close to the most tightly targeted social security system in the world. For example, if you're eligible for age pension, you can have 2 people, one person who's got financial assets of 510,000, another who's got 515. They get a different payment rate. That inherently means the system is finely calibrated, but by design. DSS doesn't make those rules, nor does Serve Australia. They reflect Parliament's views about who gets payments and the circumstances in which they get it. That policy design of tightly targeting means testing drives a lot of complexity, primarily because it relies on people to have, both when they apply and through the course of getting payments, up-to-date details of all their financial assets and income. Going back sort of 20, 30 years, it was common for people on age pension to maybe have their house and a little bit of money in the bank. That would have been an atypical age pensioner. Most age pensioners now, and certainly into the coming decades, will have much more complex financial arrangements. They'll have superannuation, and superannuation, of course, can be taken as a lump sum, it can be taken as income streams, people can convert it into annuities. That's an inherently more complex arrangement for to be taken into account. I think what we're coming back to is, what is the way then, if people are going to have those more complex arrangements, and that's a good thing, people have more superannuation, have higher retirement balances, what's the best way to ensure that capturing that information is done as seamlessly as possible? A lot of our effort now is saying, where can we actually try and get access to that data with the consent of the customer in a way that minimises them needing to go away and get it themselves or to write it on a form, simply to be able to kind of get that data as seamlessly as possible. We already do a lot of that for people on working age payments. We now use single touch payroll. So in a bygone era, they used to have to write on their form every fortnight, this is how much I earn from my employer. People would get that wrong. People would do net rather than gross. Using single touch payroll simply means that data comes directly from their employer and gets put into their application or their fortnightly reporting, and they can just choose to accept that. A bit like many of us do when it comes to tax each year, where you simply have that data coming into your tax return and you tick to say, yes, that's an accurate representation. So for age pension, I think the focus going forward is how do we then leverage off the the ability for people to minimise people needing to do a lot of that themselves. That preserves the system, that finely calibrated means testing, but actually minimises the extent to which they have to then try and deal with that complexity as they apply, or indeed have to update. A lot of what we see in the inaccuracy is people might get their financial assets right when they turn 67 and they apply, but then it's not regularly updated, and so they're not on the right payment. By utilising that data in a more seamless way with their consent, we think there's big opportunities to improve payment accuracy, but also to minimise the extent to which people actually have to bear all that complexity, but still preserve the kind of the means tested, the elements of that very finely calibrated means tested system that's built up over several decades. Sorry, you're on mute.
Carol, you're on mute, yeah.
Apologies if this, just one more question if I may, Chair. Just in relation to performance targets around how people are experiencing when they call up Services Australia. And apologies if you've answered this question previously, but I just wanted to interrogate this a little further. So you aim to answer calls within a certain time frame and you aim to answer them within 15 minutes. And in 2023-2024, this result was 34%. You do have the average wait time for answered calls was just over half an hour. And this was based on your results, I think, in 2023-2024. But the maximum amount of time that people were waiting was 2 hours and 24 minutes. And the percentage of days where a maximum wait exceeded 1 hour was nearly 60% of days. I wondered what you're doing to try and address that, because that would be a major point of frustration, I imagine, for people, particularly older people, as Ms Francis' line of questioning was pursuing there. What are you doing to try and address that?
I did touch on this a little earlier, but the agency has made significant improvements in the timeliness of both claims processing and in reducing call waiting times. In the 24-25 budget, and again in the 26-27 federal budget, the government made substantial funding commitments to increase the agency's staffing levels to be able to really respond to some of the issues that were being experienced by customers in terms of backlogs and long wait times. Ms Martin can give some more up-to-date figures in terms of those kinds of standards, so I might ask her to do that.
If you could provide that on notice, that would be wonderful, just so I'm giving enough time for other people. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thanks, Carol. Ailey, did you have any more? I'm happy to go back to some questions if
I'll take some, Chair, just for 5.
Yeah, go for it. Go for it, Scotty.
Thank you very much. Just on the back of those staffing numbers, just for the benefit of Hansard, what's the staffing levels for the Department of Social Services and Services Australia?
On age pension or on?
On age pension, yeah, while we're specific for this. Because the last line of questioning was around the age pension increase of staff.
I would need to take that on notice, Senator. I've got the overall increase, which is approximately 3,000 staff, but I would need to take on notice. I think because it's a distributed workforce, it's a bit hard, and people are skill tagged, it's a bit hard to actually probably disaggregate.
So an extra 3,000 on top of?
I'll have to get the figure, I'm sorry.
You don't know how many staff?
Not pre and post. I do need to check, sorry.
Okay, can I just get a ballpark then from someone who might know how many staff you have?
Here. I think it is here.
Let's start with the whole number. Is that easier?
Yeah. What's the total staffing number for the agency? Somebody have that? Well, perhaps...
That's not a hard one. How many staff do you have? Ballpark me. Nearest 10,000.
It's about 25,000, isn't it? 30. It's about 30,000 staff, I think.
30,000.
We'll have to come back and correct on record. I'm not the coup, I'm afraid.
Anyone got anything? No idea how many staff we've got?
Oh, so for DSS finished 30 June at about 2,400 staff overall. So that includes staff obviously in corporate, doing redress, all of the grants. In my area on social security, we have about 180 full-time equivalent.
Yep.
And of those, it's probably around 20-ish.
We have around 25 full-time equivalents in the payment structures and seniors branch, and obviously a subset of those work on the age pension program.
So probably less, so somewhere between 15 and 20 on age pension.
I'm not trying to find gotcha moments. I'm actually in awe of what you all do, and particularly the frontline service. I was just merely trying to get an understanding of how many frontline staff we have as opposed to how many. So when we talk about staff and increasing the level of service to our age pensioners and those in the community, that was my starting point as to how many were actually on the front line and how many were supposedly working from home. But if we can't... Well, do you want to have a crack at answering that in some type of...
I would need to come back to give you accurate figures on notice, I'm sorry.
That's okay. My God. How do you identify when an incorrect payment is made? Now, I can only make the assumption that if it's short, old mate's going to be on the phone fairly quick saying, I'm short. But if it's an overpayment, they're probably less enthusiastic to ring up. So are there internal mechanisms that you keep an eye on to work out incorrect payments?
Yeah, thank you, Senator. We do have a range of mechanisms in place. The payment accuracy review process, which the ANAO talked to, where we conduct around 22,500 reviews of customers' payments every year. That is then, we look at the payments to determine are they right at the time. We make adjustments under, over, or if it stays the same rate. And that figure is then provided to DSS for the overall calculation of payment accuracy across the system. So that's one mechanism that we use. Since the ANAO report, and it was highlighted in some parts, the agency has been undertaking a range of activities to identify and engage with specific customers. One of those areas is called proactive conversations, where the agency, once a customer engages with the agency either by the phone or walks into our service centre and has a question or query, at the end of that conversation, our service officers engage with the customer on areas of payment accuracy risk that may be present for them. So for an age pensioner, we ask questions about, are these the latest assets that you have? And we ask that question at the end of the conversation. And the idea of that, and we ask other questions as well, but the idea of that is to ensure that that payment at the time the customer's with us is accurate. And we've engaged at this stage in the last 2.5 years, 2 million conversations with customers. Good. And of those, about 200,000 with
So when you're engaging with them and asking them those questions about updated assets, I'm assuming, do you ask them about what the value of their superannuation is?
We ask all the relevant asset information, so that could go to the value of superannuation or other assets.
Could go to. So
it depends if they have it or not. It depends on if they have superannuation or not. Might be the case. There are customers who don't have superannuation. They might have assets.
I'm going to try. Do you ask them, do they have superannuation, or do you is it voluntary? Do they offer that to you of their own accord? Is there anywhere in the form where you ask them what the value of their superannuation is?
I might ask Ms Martin to answer on the form side.
Yes, that's in our income and assets information collection. We also have a process in place that is referred to in the audit report that's an automated process for income streams. So we collect information from financial institutions on income streams, and those income streams can be different superannuation products. And that's was implemented in 2018. So we get a regular update from those institutions, and that was put in place for the purposes of us no longer requiring customers to tell us about when there's changes to those products. For example, we get updates on CPI indexation rates so that we can then receive that data and automatically apply it to a customer record. And what we do experience in some circumstances, we will get some information through on a new product for a customer that they haven't declared. And then we need to go through a manual process through our service officers of contacting those customers, just establishing with them we've received.
I just needed to know whether or not you were capturing that, because there was some stuff in the press that wasn't being captured. But if you're telling me that it is being captured, I don't need to allocate any more assets to it. I want to go back with reference to the capturing of the data for incorrect payments. The ANAO audit, table 2.7, suggests that DVA... Oh, this is on through DVA. Sorry, I'll let that one go. Sorry, that was Department of Veteran Affairs, where the sample size was 1.1%. That's not applicable to you guys. Sorry. With effectiveness and moving forward, and I don't want to spend too much time in this space because it's a bit of navel gazing, but when it comes to AI and its task into the future, do you guys see that being an advantage with some of the backroom work for the age pension when it comes to doing assessments?
I think it's fair to say we're being very careful about anything that's payment affecting.
Yeah.
We're very conscious that the Social Security law includes a lot of decisions that require evaluative judgment, which we think would not be amenable to AI. But there are lots of, if you like, backroom type processes. Like we get thousands and thousands of pieces of correspondence in PDFs and emails. And we literally have to sort them into queues to send them to the right teams to process them. So there are opportunities to be able to sort of do more reading of documents, to sort them, and then to be able to free up people to actually do the more value-add, if you like, work or the more complex tasks. So they're the sorts of opportunities that the agency is looking at, and perhaps those kinds of things where we're freeing up time for people from very routine, repetitive kind of administrative tasks that then the outcomes of that then are considered by people and applied in a case.
So my last question, Chair, and then I'll throw back to you if that's okay. I don't know whether or not you're going to be able to answer this given some of the more straightforward questions I've asked with not a great amount of response. Do you know how much you spend on your IT systems for upgrades on an annual basis? I understand how complex the world that you live in. I understand so many moving parts. Is there just an amount in your budget that you allocate to continually be monitoring, upgrading a system, which is, as the ANO suggests, could be some parts of it as old as 40-year-old? I didn't think so. Righto, Chair. Good on you. I mean, this is...
I'm not trying to...
I know you definitely don't know these questions, but I wouldn't have thought today, with all fairness, that any of my lines of questioning... I jumped on a plane, flew down here. You all live in Canberra. I flew down today to genuinely try and participate in this in good faith. I mean, I am just gobsmacked by the amount of simple lines of questioning that I've asked that you've had absolutely no idea, to the point that you cannot tell me how many staff you employ. Thanks, Chair. I am frustrated.
Thanks, Scotty. In the last few minutes, let's go through a few things. Just back to DSS. So just confirming that you haven't started documenting your interactions with Services Australia staff.
No, that's not the point I was making, Chair. That, like, if you look at the recommendations, recommendation 1, so this was tabled I think, in January this year, the report. So it was done last year, tabled in January.
Sorry, yeah.
Recommendations 1A and 1B are about the annual assurance statement, so requiring Service Australia to do more reporting to us. So that won't happen, obviously, until, late August, September. That's when we get that annual assurance statement. On recommendation 1C, Service Australia promptly rectifies issues identified in IT systems. Well, that's an issue for them. On recommendation 2, on payment accuracy and timeliness performance reporting, and that addressing risks to payment accuracy, that actually goes to some of the issues I was talking about before. One of the primary drivers of inaccuracy of age pension is the assets not being stated correctly. Therefore, the way to improve that is by looking at ways to ingest that data from third parties as a way of minimising the extent to which you get that inaccuracy. So that is something, that's an active engagement that we're having at the moment on that with Service Australia. Recommendation 3 is about the MOU with DVA, and that's already underway in terms of refreshing that 2013 MOU. And for us, recommendation 4 was about the program logic that applies to age pension, which is a fascinating concept given it's a 118-year-old program. So we've already commenced that, and I think are pretty close to finalising that.
So, ANAO, do you mind just correcting me where I'm missing here around the recommendations around the quarterly check-ins?
I'm not sure if there's a recommendation specifically to quarterly checking, although there are a number of recommendations that do go to regular reporting between the entities.
I think it might be an opportunity for improvement. Yeah.
Can I jump in there, Chair, with a question, if that's okay?
Please.
So the report from ANAO found that the DSS's risk register was last updated in January 2019 and did not comply with the Commonwealth risk management policy requirements. DSS had advised ANAO that it has developed a shared risk plan and register during the audit. Can we ask, what does this cover and how is it being maintained?
I might have to take that on notice, sorry, but I don't have that detail with us at the moment. I think one of the helpful things out of the audit was it does have this sharper focus on the fact there are shared risks, going back to, again, the Auditor General's opening statement. Responsibility ultimately rests with our Secretary. Delivery is done entirely by Service Australia. So a lot of the risks by definition then are shared, and so increasingly we're seeing more of an approach to identifying this isn't a DSS risk or a Service Australia, it actually vests in both entities. And accordingly, we're actually seeing much stronger engagement between our Audit Committee and the Audit Committee of Service Australia. And in fact, one of the things that's currently on the internal audit program for both committees is a joint audit of one of our payments that actually then says, well, the proper way to do this, given the joint responsibilities, is to actually start to see things as being shared and to think about doing more in the range of shared audits.
And apologies, Chair, I cut off the ANAO who might also have some observations there.
Well, I just, reinforce the comments on the importance of shared risks being recorded and managed actively. What we often see across our audits right across the public sector is that agencies need to work together to achieve a policy outcome, but risk management arrangements don't always reflect that. And so we had highlighted in the audit the importance of the shared risks and the management processes around that. And it's encouraging to hear that some of those processes are being put in place.
Let's go back to Service Australia for the last couple of minutes. On the form, so the thing was done in 2018. No changes were made to the form, or none that you can provide to the committee today, in the 7 years after. But there has been changes since then.
we're looking at and have done the internal review that was mentioned by Ms Shannon, and working through what we're looking at in terms of improvements from that strategic review.
So you're looking at the review?
We're working through the recommendations or the opportunities for improvement that the review found, you know, and that includes, you know, looking at the content, looking at the form, you know, where there might be opportunities online versus the paper form, where we could improve some of the supporting information. So all of the things that that we flagged earlier, including some opportunities where some elements of the form in the future could be pre-populated with information, as we've discussed in response to other questions, to reduce the kind of response burden and the burden on applicants to actually find and verify the information.
I just don't really get the, I don't really get the thinking here, and please enlighten me. You pay someone to do this external review in 2018. Nothing has happened. It's the main topic of all of the complaints of Services Australia. And at the moment, even after an audit by the National Audit Office, the best answer you can give me today is that you're looking for areas for opportunity to improve the form. Like, why not just fix the form?
We have accepted the recommendations of the audit, and we are working through how we implement the changes. And that piece of work will guide us in how we implement the changes required.
But no changes have been made yet 8 years later. Even though it's the biggest thing that people complain about, and also the timing of how, like, you know, these are senior Australians, like, they've worked hard, you know, that, like, I mean, like, it's a really important program. I just don't understand what the resistance is. Why not just fix it?
Chair, I can't speak to
what's the obstacles to fixing it?
I can't speak to what happened between 2018 and the conclusion of the audit, but what I can say is since the audit was tabled, the agency has agreed to the recommendations, and we are taking action to implement the necessary changes. To do that, I mean, some of the things that you need to do to change a form would be the work that we've commenced around the design of the form and understanding the parts of the form, I guess, in more granular detail that are difficult for people to navigate. A change to any form or letter or obviously requires systems changes. It requires updated training for staff. A range of kind of implementation issues need to be mapped out, but they're the kinds of steps that we would be going through.
What's the timing? How long till you think you can fix this?
We're certainly working through a plan at the moment to commit to timeframes. We're very much looking to having something that we can substantially progress and have progressed, and we're looking at early 2027 as a possibility.
So early 2027, you should have the form in a better state than it is now.
We need to look at some of the implementation steps that Ms Shannon spoke through there, and work with some of our internal areas that do some of the design work with us. And equally, I think that we'd like to use some of our governance forums as we go through that change process to also engage with some of the stakeholders to test some of the changes with them also.
So what you'd be looking for is that if you did change the form, you would have a better response to the current one, basically.
Yes. We'd be trying to improve the form and improve the experience of the customer. That would be, you know, the objective, to make it easier for them to provide correct and up-to-date information so that their age pension entitlement is correctly calculated. They receive that entitlement as quickly as possible.
Seems pretty simple when you say it like that. I guess this is the whole point as to why the audit does their role and why the committee has to ask these questions, because it is really important that Australians do have access to this program, and it is really important that the access is not one that is difficult to navigate for, sounds like half of the 25,000 claims per annum. Over 10,000 people are not only finding it difficult, but are finding it so difficult that they are actively making a complaint about this. I'm sure there's a lot more that wouldn't go down the road of making the complaint. All right. Maybe if Services Australia can, as you go through the governance forums and as you go through the processes internally, if you could come back to the committee on notice with a sort of projected and possible timeline of when the form might be available, or when it might be available for you to submit that to the Minister for approval, or whatever the processes are required, that would be much appreciated. I think we're run out of time. I know that these questions are sometimes a little bit pointed and a little bit, they are quite direct, but there is a purpose to them, and I do appreciate you fronting up to the committee and for the work that you've done to navigate this, and I do appreciate the efforts to take on board the ANAO's report in the hope that this really important program that Services Australia and DSS are overseeing does get improved for the usability of Australians. So I do thank you, and I do appreciate the fact that this can be at times a robust back and forth, but it is important that we get to be able to inquire about these details. So on that note, I thank you again for giving evidence today. If you've taken questions on notice, have been asked to provide additional information, can you please forward responses to the Secretariat? The Secretariat will advise you when the information is to be provided by. If the committee has any further questions, they'll send you in writing these questions through the Secretariat. We're going to suspend the hearing and we'll resume at 10 to 1. Thank you very much. I resume the meeting and the committee's hearing into the administration of the age pension. I call representatives from the Uniting Communities, National Seniors Australia and Economic Justice Australia. For the Hansard record, could you each please state your name and the capacity in which you appear before the committee? And we'll start with Uniting Communities. Just go for it.
David Ferraro, Uniting Communities. Are you getting feedback?
Yes, I think you might be all in the same room, so maybe just one of you.
Yeah, we are. I have to mute yours.
Yeah, one at a time. Here we go.
Yep, so David Ferraro, Uniting Communities, Managing Lawyer of the Uniting Communities Law Centre.
Next.
Christine Guy, lawyer from the Uniting Communities Law Centre.
Julie Edwards, lawyer from Uniting Communities Law Centre.
Thank you. Then we'll go National Seniors Australia.
Hi, Brendan Radford, Director of Policy and Research at National Seniors Australia.
Luke Smith, Policy and Engagement Advisor.
Thank you. And Economic Justice Australia.
Yes, I'm Sally Cameron. I'm the Senior Law Reform Officer at Economic Justice Australia.
Perfect. Thank you all. And maybe for the team at Uniting, if you can turn your speakers down or one of you have your speakers on, that might be the solution. But I'm also not the tech guy, so we might just have to make do. This hearing is a formal proceeding of the Parliament. The giving of false or misleading evidence is a serious matter and may be regarded as a contempt of the Parliament. The evidence given today will be recorded by Hansard and attracts parliamentary privilege. Do any of you have a opening statement before we move to questions from the committee? And we'll go through in that order. Uniting Communities.
Yes, we have a statement.
All right. Over to you, Mr. Ferraro.
I have to put you on.
Yeah, if you can put your speakers on mute, just so one speaker.
All right, that might work. There we go. So good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to appear today. We acknowledge that we're presenting from the traditional lands of the Kaurna people and pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. So my name, as said earlier, is David Ferraro. I'm the Managing Lawyer here at Uniting Communities Law Centre, which is part of Uniting Communities. We're an inclusive South Australian not-for-profit organisation. We deliver more than 115,000 connections to support each year, and we have been working alongside communities for over 120 years. Our services span aged care, mental health, homelessness, disability, family violence and legal assistance. Our law centre includes a specialist social security law service and an elder abuse prevention unit. Through this work, we regularly support older Australians navigating Centrelink decisions, including appeals to the Administrative Review Tribunal, and we see firsthand how the system operates in practice. Our submission draws on these experiences. Many of our clients rely on the age pension as their primary source of income, and we see consistent issues arising from how it is administered. In particular, we are concerned about delays in acting on information, administrative errors that lead to preventable debt, and the way gifting provisions operate in situations involving elder abuse. Across these issues, a common theme is that systemic challenges are too often borne by pensioners rather than being identified and resolved early. The current system places a significant burden on older people to identify and correct errors and to navigate complex review processes where decisions are contested. For people with health challenges, vulnerability or diminished capacity, these processes can be overwhelming and create real barriers to fair and timely outcomes. We believe there is a clear opportunity for reform to improve early error detection, strengthen communication and better safeguard vulnerable pensioners, particularly in cases involving elder abuse. And thank you for the opportunity to contribute and we look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much. Shall we go next to National Seniors Australia?
Yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity to appear today. We welcome the AO's report, but the thing for us is that in the ANI report, it said that the rules are so complex that they are difficult for staff and applicants to understand. And it's this complexity that is our major focus of our submission. The the rules are complex by design, obviously, to limit access and entitlement. And I noted that a DSS representative who spoke to the inquiry earlier today referred to it as the most highly targeted in the world. Now, that level of targeting comes at a cost, creating an expensive and complex system and increases the risk of administrative error. Restricting access to payments creates a labyrinth of eligibility rules that require older people to provide significant paperwork to prove eligibility and determine entitlement, tying up staff and creating service bottlenecks and long wait times. This complexity is a function of the legislative framework, which undermines any moves towards simplicity. Yet it should be the primary goal of government or good government to make the system as simple as possible. Past NSA research into seniors' views of Centrelink has shown that interaction with Centrelink represent a key frustration of older people. Survey respondents dissatisfied with Centrelink experience, that was 42% of them that in our survey, ascribed this to the complicated forms and processes and long waiting times. Conversely, they actually the positive experiences were around the staff and the quality of the staff. Unfortunately, some of the ANO recommendations that have been made, recommendation 5, for example, will actually increase complexity. And now we're not suggesting that we throw the baby out with the bathwater. We're talking about making intelligent changes to remove the burden, especially for low-risk individuals and applicants, or things that remove excessive reporting. This will reduce the administrative burden and allow government to redirect its limited resources more effectively and improve the efficiency of the system as a whole. But this can only come through legislative change. And otherwise, we have to put in place more complexity and cost for both government and citizens. Legislation needs to be written in a way that Services Australia can design its processes as simply as possible, but it just can't at the moment. And it's up to government to do that, because otherwise DSS can only really operate within the rules. Thank you.
Economic Justice.
Yes, thank you. Good morning. Thanks for the opportunity to speak to the committee. I'm speaking from the lands of the Yagara and Turrbal people. I'd like to pay my respects to elders past and present. By way of introduction, Economic Justice Australia, we're the peak for 22 community legal centres, including Uniting Communities, that provide specialist legal advice to people on their social security rights, including people struggling to understand their age pension. I'd like to just touch on 4 issues. The first one being access, and I know there's been a lot of conversations this morning about the forms. We know that many people struggle to access age pension. They struggle with the claims and reporting processes because Services Australia is not providing the type of assistance that they need. Services Australia has boosted its assisted claims process, but assistance isn't always offered, including to people who've travelled into a Centrelink office who are then referred to computers over there in the corner without staff assistance, which is just ineffectual. Online forms have their own issues, including questions being opaque and drop-down style options that provide no opportunity for people to describe their circumstances that aren't a neat fit. And these are legal documents, so a simple misunderstanding of the intention of a question can then have major consequences, including triggering a sizable debt. Digital coaching is great. I know that's come up, but uptake is low, inexplicably low, and it requires that the person have some underlying digital capacity or things go wrong. And I'm thinking here of a client who it turned out had numerous MyGov accounts because helpful staff had helped her set up a new email each time she came in because she couldn't remember the old one, so she could get onto MyGov. So our members see people who've lost their payments, ended up with a debt because they've been pushed onto digital systems they can't use, including people who have letters sitting in MyGov for an extended period, despite the fact they don't know how to use MyGov, how to access MyGov. So I guess the primary message around access is that people want someone to help them fill out the forms and explain what they need to do next. On the phone, or in particular, we hear people saying they just love to sit across the desk from a Centrelink officer because the face-to-face conversation gives them a chance to explain their circumstances and gives them faith in the process. The second issue, payment accuracy. So we know people on age pension are a particular cohort with specific concerns around financial security, given most people need to live the rest of their lives drawing from finite or no personal safety net. And I think that's a very weighty consideration. And I'm reminded of a pensioner in central Queensland who'd stopped taking milk in his tea so he could turn off his fridge for 8 hours of the year to save on electricity, to avoid going into rental arrears and keep his housing. So payment inaccuracy puts people in genuine financial hardship and fear, including people who are underpaid, but also those who are overpaid, because well after the funds have been spent, they need to repay Services Australia. And that includes the last of people's savings or relying on age pension, sometimes for years, a reduced rate of age pension. The third issue, communications. People really don't know what Services Australia knows about them and whether they're getting the correct rate of payment. Communications usually automated and letters a deficit of personal information. And in particular, I'd love to draw your attention to debt letters, which are a thorn in the side of EJA. Section 1229 of the Social Security Act requires that debt letters specify the reason for a debt, including a brief explanation of the circumstances leading to it, but most debt notices fall short. It's a matter of procedural fairness. Without specifics, the person can't establish whether the facts that have been used to establish the debt are correct or not. And it's common for our members to see people who come in thinking a debt might have been caused by something when it was caused by something quite different. Many people don't have the will to take on governments, or they're reassured by Services Australia staff that the debt's correct, so they just start repaying it. And, our members see people living in poverty on a reduced rate of age pension for years for a debt that they actually don't owe. And lastly, very briefly, automation. So we'd like to push back against the recurring promises of automation delivering greater efficiencies, because we continue to see automation resulting in systemic errors with individuals bearing the cost. We can see great benefit in Services Australia being able to source data for maybe like a super balance to ensure that information is up to date, but its use around decisions is highly problematic. We'd like to urge caution and instead just really push for that emphasis on Services Australia having well-trained staff, the training needed to administer this complex system and provide accessible pathways to meet age pensioners where they're at.
Thank you so much, each of you. I guess I want to start and throw it open. I'm not sure if you got a chance to listen to the hearings this morning, but a big part of the discussion was around the forms and the fact that Services Australia had commissioned a review in 2018 to look at the forms, and not much has changed. And I guess then also that results in a huge number of complaints as various touch points that you've all having to work through and live through on a daily basis. I guess, what advice can you give the committee around the parts of the form that simply could be amended to enable this to be more user-friendly? Are there bits of the form that is superfluous in your view, or that could be the language that could be simplified, just to make this whole process a bit easier for the Australians who are trying to access it? It's an open question. Feel free to jump in, anyone who's got some advice or views on that. Don't be shy. Don't be shy.
Probably not with the answer that you're hoping for, which is I'm not aware of any quick fixes. So obviously I recommend going back to the review. Many people have said today there are many things that need to be checked to check that someone is entitled in the rate that they need to be paid. So that is an obstacle that needs to be navigated. And we're interested in the forms being redesigned and simplified, but really what we're interested in immediately is for people to have more help. I believe Services Australia maybe suggested that those forms can be acquired in translated form. I'm not sure that's right. I think through an assisted claims process, maybe you can have an interpreter talk someone through them, but I think access around plain languages and other languages other than English is a really critical point. But I mean, really we actually spend a lot of time giving input to Services Australia on their forms, and we can see that they are making sincere efforts in many pockets to improve those systems. But by and large, our perspective is they're really not written with the person in mind. They're framed around the social security obligation, so people don't find them easy to navigate. So I would suggest a lived experience group would be a really critical component of redesigning those forms.
Yeah, our view is that unless we get legislative change to the Social Security Act, we're not going to be able to make the changes to. I mean, the reason that nothing has happened is because the forms are reflective of the obligations under the Act. And our view is that unless we're going to, remove those obligations or, change the way the Act, operates, you're not going to get much change to the forms. So one of the things and this came up in a co-design process where ourselves and CODA were with DSS in Canberra. There was a conversation, and it actually came from a staff member who worked for Centrelink, because there were a bunch of people there from Centrelink there giving their experience, who said that, well, we need a triage process. We need to basically be able to identify people who are clearly are eligible for the pension, and just go, yep, that's great. Give them a couple of simple questions, ask them demographic things about, their partner status, their housing, a couple of quick questions, and then what are their asset levels? And then we go, oh, well, clearly you're going to get, you don't have any money, you clearly will be eligible. Let's just give them the pension and put our resources towards people who actually, the part pension is the people who are at risk of, payments and overpayments. But the legislation won't allow that to happen, as far as we're aware. And we should be taking a risk-based approach to this. There's lots of compliance systems around the world that actually do this. They apply a risk-based approach. And it's about asking the right questions up front, so then say, okay, this person is clearly, but also with warning saying, if you're wrong, then, we will need to, we'll need to check on this occasionally. We will, if your circumstances change, then you need to let us know, which happens anyway in the process, in the application process, so that people are clear on what their obligations are. Because obviously people, circumstances change. They might get an inheritance or something, else will change in their circumstances. They might get a job. But again, our view is employment income shouldn't even be in the mix anyway, because if you don't have much resources behind you, if you're going to work, then you should get the pension and you pay through the tax system anyway. But it's those bigger changes that we need to make to the system, to the legislation, in order for them to then change the form. It's not the answer you want, it's more of a long-term kind of proposition. But that's what we believe needs to happen, so that we can redirect the resources better at, the people that are in the margin that do have, complex, circumstances. And even then, they could be even made simpler by, removing, income from, or the income test or something, like that. So that's our view on it, because we've been a participant in the form process. And yeah, there are some small things that can happen, but they don't seem to be happening.
I mean, from our perspective, the forms isn't a big part of the work that we do. It's more about what happens with the information that's provided to Centrelink and what's actioned and not actioned. And that's where we see the big issues happening, even when people are informing or complying with what they need to do and reporting what they need to report. That information can sometimes go... it's not updated on their system for long periods of time, and that's when then we see debts arising and people just totally confused as to why they're even in that position when they believe they've provided all the information that they need to in relation to their pension. So yeah, we see it more from that end. I mean, maybe obviously we would agree that better ways of providing information is obviously an important part of the whole process. And the other thing that we would see is also people maybe weaponising those forms and processes when it's not actually the older person. So it could be their power of attorney or their nominee who, unfortunately can sometimes be their abuser as well, using those forms to manipulate and hide things as well.
Sorry, could I just add to that, adding to David's point, that most of our member centres do very little work assisting people to fill out forms simply because they're not resourced to do it, and it's also not a great use of resources having lawyers sit with people to go through those very long forms. But they do spend time scuttling about trying to work where to refer people, where someone might be able to get some support to fill out a form. We know family members help. We know all kinds of people help, which then is concerning about things being unintentionally filled out incorrectly, as well as, people knowingly, a nominee or something doing something intentionally. So that's really why we need Services Australia to deliver on that. We also know there's private businesses, right, that are set up charging people hundreds of dollars to fill out the form, even when they've got extremely simple income and asset arrangements. So, yes, it's hard to find people with the detailed knowledge of what commonly goes wrong with the forms, other than I think Services Australia should be able to look back at what it is that ends up in, debts occurring.
I'm going to see if my colleagues want to ask a question. Before I keep going, I was a bit of a time hog last hearing, so I'm going to go to... I've got a
question that would follow on from that around the preventable debt to Uniting Communities. So if someone incurs a debt, and this could be, anyone can answer, if someone incurs a debt with Services Australia, is there somewhere where Services Australia have like a receivables ledger of how much money is outstanding? Anyone can answer that one?
I think answer it. I'm not sure that it's in exactly that form, but I do know that there's valuations of outstanding debts that we see from time to time. The quantum.
Yep, and the number's not important. It's more important to me to understand what's the integrity of that number, because I would have thought that those age pensioners would be the least amount to service any third-party debt or tertiary debt. Is it all expected to be paid, or is there a form that may be materialised? And to that, when you're considering that, does Services Australia garnish people's pensions to service that debt?
Yes, they do. The standard rate, I believe, is 15%. People can request to make lower repayments for a period. That's one of the conversations we're currently having with them, why someone on age pension with no additional income would need to recontact every 3 months if their circumstances haven't changed. But that's a piece of work being done at the moment. So that's the problem with debts that people unknowingly occur, particularly over a long period, is that then they have to survive on a reduced rate of age pension.
I ask about the integrity of the debt through the prism of, to use an example, someone at the age of 70 has unintentionally acquired a debt. The debt payback period might be 10 years and life expectancy is another 3 years. So where does the remainder... does the system write off debt or does it stay there on the ledger?
I believe it's written off, although that term in Social Security means something slightly different. So I believe that the debt ends when the person dies, but it's something I think need to confirm with Services Australia.
Okay, thank you. To the National Seniors, guys, thank you for your opening comments. You spoke about wanting to move to a more or a less complex system and towards something more simplistic. Have you modelled or have you done any work on what that would look like so that we could present that to the department?
Not. The only thing that we have done is that under our Let Pensioners Work campaign, which means is about exempting employment income from the age pension, we have some modelling from Deloitte which showed that it would take 8.3% of pensioners to return to work or to work more under that scenario for it to be cost neutral. That's the only kind of modelling that we've done. We don't have the capacity to do that kind of modelling ourselves.
What kind of feedback have you received from pensioners that they're supportive of being able to work, or your Let Pensioners Work campaign?
Overwhelmingly supportive of that. People understand that, and we're not saying people should be forced to work. We're saying that people who need or want to work should be able to work and not affect their pension. We get told from people all the time that even though there's single touch payroll systems in place, and that they are worried about a debt from employment from Centrelink, and they will go down to Centrelink to declare their earnings because they fear the debt, any sort of debt from misreporting or getting something wrong. Which is really an inefficient system. And I think the point was made before that people could turn up at Centrelink and get pushed onto computers in the corner when they need assistance because they don't work well with the technology, and they don't trust that they're getting it right. I think. So there's definitely strong support for this.
How much can a pensioner earn at the moment?
It's at the moment it's 11,800, I think. That's not including the income-free area that's built into the age pension. Is that right? Yeah.
Yes, it depends on the income-free area, their couple status, and there's also the work bonus, which allows amounts to be saved and then used again. So it's highly individualised.
What do you suggest that number should look like? Or our
view is that all income should be exempt, employment income that is, should be exempt, and then people can just pay back through the tax system because the pension is taxable income. And people say, but then they might get a debt. Well, you can tell Centrelink to put aside a proportion of your pension if you're a worker, or for any other reason, to be honest. And then at tax time, it gets balanced. So there wouldn't be an issue with overpayments. And you would just pay tax. And that's all we're at. And it would simplify the system. People wouldn't need to report their income anymore. Currently, I think there's only about 97,000 people who actually declare, who are on a part pension because of that circumstance. We want people to work more. We want people to be engaged, in the workforce. It's a good idea, but I don't want to take up too much time on the committee here because other people want to make points.
Economic Justice Australia, you mentioned, you spoke about the digital coaching. Can you tell me if that coaching is online coaching or is it in person?
I believe that is in person,
okay.
That someone goes into the centre, they're asked to bring some things in with them and they're supported through that. So we became interested in it because we were trying to push for it to be promoted. So my understanding, there's only about 100,000 people a year accessing it, which is, I think that's surprisingly low. I presume it's because people don't know about it, but I'm not sure. But we have, since becoming interested in it and talking to our members, we've become aware really that of the risk of people being supported into it when really it's not something that's going to work for them and it'll create problems of its own. But yeah, we'd like it to be further promoted and more accessible.
Okay. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Carol?
Thank you very much. Thank you to all of you for your submissions. They're all really excellent. So thank you very much for the time you've put into providing those for us. Across each of the submissions, there's obviously some similar themes. One of the issues which I've heard a couple of you speak to as well, is that around the benefits of automation and uniting, I think you specifically referenced this and others may have as well. You're suggesting that recipients could opt into a system that has greater authority to contact all relevant systems to access information such as the ATO, superannuation, etc., which was also talked about in today's hearing as a possibility moving forward. Are you all in agreement with that? There's obviously always risks with automation, but given the amount of angst and stress that this is causing people downstream, are you all in support of that? Yep, is that fair to say? No objections? Yep. Okay, also a common theme is that it's not common knowledge among pensioners that they're required to declare changes in their financial circumstances within 14 days. So I imagine you're all of the view that the government needs to do a better job of informing people of their reporting obligations so that people are clear on that, although I'm sure it fills people with horror needing to then navigate the system in order to complete relevant paperwork or what's needed. Yep.
Yep, the 14 days, can I just say, it's very short. So I think as well as letting people know the rationale is, the rationale is if you're paid fortnightly, it's to try to prevent even a single payment going out at the wrong rate. So that's really the driving force behind that time period.
Sorry, you go.
So also, bearing in mind that we're dealing with people with, some people with just diminished capacity as well as they get older, as well as other complexities, other disabilities. And 14 days can be challenging for a lot of people to report information. And just picking up on the previous point, a lot of people assume that the government would already know a lot of their circumstances because they think they talk to all these other agencies and tax office and all that. So they just assume, why do I need to say this? Why doesn't the government already know?
And thank you for your submissions around the abolishment, potentially abolishing the income test. And I know you don't want to take up too much time on that, but just reiterating that point you've made, we've got 2.7 million people who are getting the age pension, and I think you just said that you think it's under 100,000 people who are working alongside the receipt of the age pension. Did I hear you correctly?
Yeah, that's those who are there. So there will be people who are working who could be getting the pension but don't because...
Sure, but in terms of people who are claiming the pension and working as well.
Yeah,
yep.
But our point is that there is an income and an assets test. And if you have significant assets, you come under the asset test. And, our view is actually we go a step further and actually get rid of the income test, just have an asset test. If you've got assets, your pension will be reduced by that. If you don't have assets and therefore you are, not in a position to be doing all that well, then if you want to work, go for it, because,
And I assume the rationale behind your thinking is that this is what adds this layer of complexity around how people need to navigate the system and what you're trying to present a practical idea in order to remove some of that complexity.
That's right.
Yep. Just in terms of elder abuse, I think all of you have referenced elder abuse, at least two of you have in your submissions. And I just wondered if we could touch on that as well. But just before I get to that, one of the recommendations from Uniting, you have suggested that we should consider introducing a mandatory vulnerability check, particularly in a couple of areas, but particularly before we cancel the age pension, and to establish a clear remedy pathway to reverse decisions where elder abuse is present or pension loss would place an older person at serious risk. Would you mind just speaking to that a little further?
Yes. Yes. So what we see, and in relation to elder abuse, is multiple avenues, and it's usually perpetrated by children of the older person, and so it can stem from, "Oh, mum, you move in with us. We'll buy a house together, or we will. You can move into our house. We'll renovate. You can move in. We'll put your name on the title." And that will acknowledge what you've, selling of your house. But that never happens. So mum moves in, the relationship breaks down very quickly, mum's kicked out, and then when they come to see us, well, we look at the title and their name is not on the title, all the money has been transferred across. Centrelink then at the end of the tail is the sting in the tail, because then it affects their age pension and they're deemed as gifting all this amount of money to their children, and they have nowhere to go. So not able to get into aged care because they don't have a bond anymore, which they would have had. So we see that happening. So and that's when these decisions are made, sometimes the older person is taken advantage because of their diminished capacity, so they don't know. So we'll see even at that extent where people have no capacity and their power of attorney is doing that, sell the home to move into the nursing home, and that money is never paid across as a bond. The fees are never paid, and it can often be months before the nursing home will actually address the issue, and because they're thinking, oh well, this poor person, their fees aren't being paid, there must be something wrong. We're sending letters, we're sending correspondence, and so debts could be $30,000-$40,000 in unpaid fees before someone actually does something about it. They'll contact our service, and that person has sailed off into the sunset, sold all the assets, spent all the money. You can't even recover anything from that person, and then Centrelink will say, we're going to stop your pension.
Yeah.
And then under wiser. Sometimes they will never be any wiser because they are suffering from dementia, or other times they just think, well, my son or daughter was managing that and they said they did all of this. I don't understand why this is impacting me now. So there's no capacity testing, there's no verifying people's instructions even in completing forms. Go back to forms, no one is checking that, but the consequences are significant. And as we see people die during the process as well. So it's such a shock to their system that they die before it can even be resolved. So
thank you. Chair, I'm just mindful of the time. Apologies. Thank you. Thanks for your indulgence.
No, don't be silly. Ailey, did you have any questions?
Just a couple. Is that okay, Chair?
Of course. We started 5 minutes late, so we'll go for another 7 minutes and then we'll wrap up.
Okay. Just quickly, thank you all for appearing today. Really appreciate it. I completely agree with allowing pensioners to earn more and reducing the compliance on pensioners. And I feel like the reliance on pensioners to comply and report far outweighs the department's checks and balances. Well, that's my feeling anyway, that there's an overburden on pensioners at a time in their lives when their capacity is not great. And so I just, I raised a few issues with the department just around, the one-on-one contact, and they're going to get back to us on how available that is, because I suspect it's not very available. The one-on-one support to help with paperwork and all that sort of thing. But the thing I'm really concerned about is the debt notices, but also payments and the department's ability to check and correct debt notices and payments. From what I heard this morning, it's not mandatory for them to do their post-payment testing, and I'm not even sure about what happens with debt notices. It comes under that they have a discretion as to whether they do random post-payment testing. Could you talk to that, any of you, on some of those experiences with incorrect debts or incorrect payments and how that process plays out for pensioners?
Do you want to talk, Julie?
I think really importantly, we just find pensioners completely lost when they reach us. Often they've been trying to get decisions changed or an understanding of what's gone on in the process. And we just often get a lot of situations where pensioners have been providing information to the agency, things are not being updated. And then when they come to us and they go to learn about the review process and they go to the review, an authorised review officer, for example, in the agency, often the review officer affirms the agency's decision and says, you must have known because you were telling Centrelink this information and you should have known. And we just find that generally they're doing the best they can in really difficult situations, often with very limited support, and that the agency doesn't sort of seem to address their concerns. And it's only when we get involved, and obviously the advocates channel has been really helpful for us. It's a process where we can reach out to the agency on behalf of people, but often the agency at multiple levels isn't really making internal changes to support the pensioners, and it's only when it gets to the tribunal that they're getting decisions overturned. So these are just some of the things that we're seeing.
Can I just add an example to that? I know of one person who, for example, had an overpayment because their circumstances had changed. They notified Centrelink. The payment continued to come at the wrong rate. Luckily for them, they were upstanding citizens and knew that it was wrong and put the money into a savings account. Over a period of about 9 months, contacted Centrelink continually and told them, oh, you've overpaid me. And it took 9 months. Finally, they got somebody who could actually solve their issue. But that's someone who was very, engaged and knew that there was an overpayment. So if the system is failing for someone like that, someone who is not engaged and it's just money's coming in and they're just spending it, they're in trouble because eventually Centrelink will be like, hey, you owe us money. And clearly there's an issue with, he had contacted Centrelink and said, this is the circumstance, and then nothing happened. It clearly wasn't escalated or notified. So, this is the same person who said they've had really great experiences at Centrelink. So it's a variable, issue because, as the ANAO said, even staff can't understand the rules. So this is the problem that we're dealing with. It's just so complicated that you can have people just, having this circumstance happen to them.
Yeah, can I just reiterate something I said at the beginning, that there's an assumption that people are across what they are entitled to get, but most people are not sitting there going, okay, so the pension is this rate. If I earn $226, then I'm something, then the 50-cent reduction applies, then and then there's the income bank. I think an enormous number of pensioners do not know that the income bank, the working credit system exists, which is completely separate from the income test. So I think there's an example in our submission of someone who was trying to work out how to tell Centrelink they were doing a little bit of part-time work, couldn't work out how to do it, so enormously stressed, and when they finally got some help to tell them they were under the threshold or the cap for the income bank and it had no impact on their payment, people just are not across the detailed way that these systems work. So they don't know they're being paid wrongly. And I think the greatest demonstration of that recently is that, the ANAO's finding of $5 billion being incorrectly paid, either under or overpaid, and people not realising they weren't getting the exact right amount of payment. So, yeah, it's the greatest demonstration. Most people can't pick when they're not getting the right rate of payment.
Thank you. Thank you all.
All right, team, thank you so much. Apologies, I've also been multitasking here a little bit, but luckily I was on mute. Thank you all very much for giving evidence here today. If you've taken questions on notice, been asked to provide additional information, could you please forward your responses to the Secretariat? The Secretariat will also advise you of the information that is to be provided, advise you of when the information is to be provided by. If the Secretariat or the committee has any further questions, I'll send you these in writing through the Secretariat. Thank you all very much for appearing before the committee, for the time you took to put in your submissions, but especially and most importantly for the work you do to support Australians navigating this system. You shouldn't be so busy, but we really do appreciate your efforts and the sincerity in which you clearly all bring to this job. And yeah, the community is lucky to have that. So we do really appreciate it. Thank you also to the Secretariat, to broadcasting, and all of those who helped make the hearings today possible. We are going to close up there, and the committee will reconvene tomorrow morning. Thank you all.